And we're back. This is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute. Welcome back, Scott.
Great to be with you. Great to be with our listeners again. What is your first reaction to a prospect's objection? How can you respond in a way to build confidence in you, your product, and the marketplace? Once we label the objection and follow a process to seek the real reason, we can apply the response in a way to build value, reassurance, and credibility. In this episode, Bill and I will investigate overcoming objections, how to address them, and much, much more in episode 409 of Get in the Door podcast.
Well, as we get started, we want to just talk a little bit about what we're hearing from the sales professionals that make up our podcast audience. Scott, who have you heard from this week?
Well, I heard from David, who concurred with the difference between Costco and Sam's Club on determining value. It seems people need a little help, and I use that word intentionally, to understand the process of determining value. And also, it's always great to see the downloads increase and know that it's because our listeners are sharing the podcast with others. So thank you for doing that. This segment of Get in the Door podcast is brought to you by The Art of Prospecting, your guide to getting in the door by Steve Kloida.
Steve Kloida was known internationally for increasing salespeople's ability to make solid appointments with qualified prospects. You too can learn this essential skill by ordering a copy of his superb book, The Art of Prospecting, your guide to getting in the door. In this book, Steve shares the top strategies and tactics he has developed, implemented, and personally tested with more than 1 million sales and prospecting calls. You can get his book on the website, theprospectingexpert.com. In addition, check out his other great online resources. Instant Sales Coaching, which will guide you through 5 online success modules. A guided prospecting process entitled Call Reluctance Transformer, and the Magnetic Selling Strategies Workbook, a detailed step-by-step guide to increasing your sales. Get any of these valuable resources at theprospectingexpert.com.
So we are going to start our book club segment, and we are talking about the book, The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz. And we are on chapter 6, You Are What You Think You Are. So I'll just go through a few notes, Scott, and then you can tell us what you found out. But his major tenet as he started out this whole thing was that other people are going to see in us what we see in ourselves. And so our own self-image affects how other people treat us, how seriously they take us, how important they perceive us to be, is all wrapped up in how valuable we see ourselves. And that's because how we think starts to regulate our actions. I was talking to a gentleman the other day who's doing a lot of prospecting for his business. And in our conversation, you could see that he thought he was bugging people. And he had an image that said, you know, what I have isn't always as important, and I don't want to bother them. And if we go into prospecting with the thought that we're bothering people, it's going to be very difficult to have an attitude and a posture that says that what we're going to talk about is important.
Yeah, I think Steve Kloida had a great response. He said, you have to believe that you've got a cure for cancer, and you're looking for people that have cancer. And if you don't believe you have a cure for cancer, you're going to be hesitant on calling people. You're going to be hesitant to starting conversations, and you're going to be feeling like you're bugging them and you're bothering them. But that's a belief that people have. Right. We cannot outperform a negative belief. We cannot outperform a negative self-image either. And how we think about ourselves is basically going to be projected through our tone, our actions, our voice, our words, everything.
And, use the word hesitant, and we can hear when someone is hesitant in their call. It's like, well, I've got this stuff, and you know, it's a good Minnesota. We're from Minnesota, Scott and I, for our listeners, and an outgoing Minnesotan is one who looks at the other person's shoes while they're talking sometimes. So we tend to put in too many qualifiers. If it's okay, if you don't mind, it's am I bugging you? Is this a problem? And when we put all those in, we set up this process that says, I don't really believe in myself or in what I'm selling.
Mm-hmm. There can be a great move on being hesitant when you're working with a prospect and you're responding to what they want and you're hesitating a little bit. I was just on a call this morning and I was hesitating as I was talking with a prospect about working with them. And I said to them, the reason I'm hesitating is I think that we're both talking about what we're familiar with when it comes to putting together a training program, but not what's going to be a perfect fit to what you want. And if you're sensing a hesitation, it's because I really believe that we need to work together to do something that we're not familiar with. And that's what I'm proposing, is something that you may not be familiar with, but it's going to solve the challenge that you want to solve, and not just be something that's easy to do because it's familiar to us. Right. And that just changed the whole conversation, because I was not saying yes to something that was familiar. I was challenging them. And if we don't challenge our prospects, we won't change our prospects.
Right. So how do you feel that your appearance maybe, or your way you think about your business affects how you come across to people?
I think at this time where a lot of us are working at home, I think it's important for us to get up in the morning, get ready for the day. And sometimes it requires putting on good shirts and maybe even a tie to make us feel like we're at the office, because it's easy. I mean, I haven't put on my dress shoes in probably 3 months. And it's like, I look at them, I go, God, those are such great dress shoes, but I have no reason to put them on right now.
Right. And I was looking at my rack of ties and going, well, that's going to be a while before I wear those again.
But how we dress definitely has an effect on how we feel about ourselves. It's just like a hairstylist. I can't get a haircut. How do people feel when they get a haircut? It's like, what is that song? I feel pretty, oh so pretty. and it has an impact on our attitude. Right, it's just something as simple as a haircut. So we need to be conscious of that, and we need to outperform that. And a lot of our negative self-talk, 85% of our self-talk is negative. What are we really saying to ourselves? What are we really talking to ourselves about?
Right. And he talks about giving yourself a daily pep talk. Right. So, and I've talked to a lot of salespeople, and some of the most successful ones have a 3x5 card in their pocket, or it's something on their phone that pops up every morning at a certain time, and they read it out loud to themselves. I think it's important to give that pep talk out loud so you can hear it and put energy into it and not give yourself a negative. But I've got one right here on my desk. It's a pep talk that I use before I'm going to make phone calls, because I need to give myself a rush of adrenaline. I heard one speaker say what he does is he says, on your mark, get set, go. And then he starts making his phone calls. And that's all he needs for a pep talk, but it gets him energized so that he can feel inside that he's important and things are ready to go.
I mean, we are what we think about most. And I think that's a Napoleon Hill quote. And it's really on how we describe our work too. In the chapter, we talked about 3 people that are laying bricks, and one person says, I'm laying bricks. And then if you ask the second person, what are you doing? And that person says, well, I'm making $9.30 an hour. And then the third person says, when asked the question, what are you doing? He says, I'm building the world's greatest cathedral. And they're all doing the same thing, but they're really looking at what kind of impact are they making. And when you look at the impact that you make on somebody else's life and it's personal, wow, that's powerful. And know that every time that you interact with somebody, you have an opportunity to make an impact. And that's something that another person is inviting you into their life to make an impact. And boy, I mean, that's a powerful opportunity.
So conceive, believe, achieve. I think we talked about that last week. It's all about the belief. And do you believe you have something that's valuable out there? It's not just laying brick.
Yeah. So daily affirmations are really important. And I always ask the question when I get that negative self-talk and I don't feel like I'm doing something that's good, or I'm not feeling the confidence, and I go, where's this coming from? Where's the evidence to support this? And if we ask ourselves, where's the evidence, and we search for it, we're not going to find it. Yeah. And when we really think about what we're thinking about, then that's where we're going to make a change.
How are you seeing the lockdown and the effects of that playing on salespeople's confidence and the way they see themselves?
It seems like, and I know that this obviously is, and it might be a little generalizing, but men value their self-worth on what they do and not who they are. And when I feel like I am not performing my role and what I feel like I can make a contribution to society and the marketplace and the people that I love working with, salespeople, I don't feel like I'm as valuable. So my confidence goes down, my attitude's affected, I'm not as outgoing, I'm not as enthusiastic, and I kind of cave in more to adversity, which, where's the evidence of this? I'm still the same person, I still know the same information, I can still make a difference in other people's lives, it's just going to be a little bit different, but I need to value my worth based on who I am and not what I do.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I'm coming out of this whole pandemic with a different perspective of how I value myself. It's based on who I am and not what I do. And that is a lot of work. My faith has a tremendous influence in that. And it's just a struggle for me. But I know coming out of this, I'm going to be a better person because of that.
Right. And I think it's really important to find new habits, right? I think what's thrown a lot of people off is they have these habits. This is how I go to work. This is I go out to the field. I do these things. I go to networking functions. I meet these people. I go to these meetings and I meet more people. And those are all gone. And maybe they'll come back. But right now, today, I've got to create new activities that build my own value for myself, that let me know I'm doing things that are productive toward the end result of what I need to do to survive, which is to make those sales. And what are those activities going to be? I have to be creative enough to think about them. And if I'm fortunate enough to work in a group of salespeople in my own industry, I should be talking to them about what are you doing differently? How are you working with your clients? And how are you creating and finding new clients?
I think the last part of the chapter, we talked about different situations and asking ourselves different questions. I think that that's really a powerful checklist to go through. So if you get the book and you're following along with us, go through those situations and those questions. Today, we're going to be talking about overcoming objections, and we're going to take turns discussing different points. I think this is an area that salespeople struggle with a little bit. I believe in a perfect world, we shouldn't have objections.
Perfect
I know
world.
it's a bit of a long shot. I know that's a bold statement.
We're far from a perfect world right now.
Yeah,
we thought we had a perfect.
But I mean, an objection is an unasked question, and it's a question that us as salespeople did not ask a prospect before we got to the commitment, got to the close or commencement, depending on how we describe that last step in the sales process. So I think that it's very similar to conflict. On how we manage conflict is very similar to how we feel about objections. And objections are really buying signs. I mean, a prospect is voicing a concern that is a barrier to a yes decision. I think in some cases when we work with prospects and we don't have any objections and we think this is going too easy, there's going to be something that's just going to blow up at the end. Right. Have you ever had that happen to you, Bill?
Well, then we're not having those conversations. If we're not meeting objections, we're the one doing all the talking.
Right.
Those questions, those issues, those how would you do this can be seen as objections, or as Brian Tracy calls them, requests for more information. We didn't cover something that they saw as important. I think a lot of objections come down to the fact that we didn't do our legwork early on about finding out truly what the needs are and what the big challenges are. And so now we're in some cases throwing stuff at the wall and it's not hitting what their needs are. So they are requests for more information, and we should be learning from those. And actually, I would advise people to write down what those key objections are so they can handle them earlier in the process. Right. Too often, we shouldn't be surprised by the same objection we've gotten 3 times. And if we've gotten that objection 3 times, why aren't we handling it more effectively earlier in the conversation?
I think we need to ask ourselves, what are we saying that's creating that objection? I've seen salespeople go through sales calls and they get the same objection, like you said, Bill, and they don't realize that what they're saying is creating an objection.
Oh, we do that. Yes, we create them. Mm-hmm.
What? It's like we put the bullet right in the gun.
Why do they keep saying that?
Why? I mean, why are my prospects the same? There's something in common with all your prospects. It's you.
That's right. That's right. Quit looking outside.
We've talked about debriefing the sales call before, and after a sales call, think about the objections you got and the questions that they're asking. They may not be in the form of objections, but like Bill said, they're the requests for more information. And think about, what are you saying that is causing your prospects to bring that up as a concern or an issue? And maybe think about phrasing it differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We've brought up an issue in a roundabout way by saying, well, this customer did this, and I didn't think about that. And so we bring up those problems. What do you see those objections? Do they fall into categories for you that you try to work on? Or
I think there's 4 types of objections that I hear. One is a drawback, which, in some cases it costs money, or there's a price associated with it, and they might look at that as a drawback. We need to be able to fill that gap in between the problem, the challenge, the impact, the cost, the consequences compared to the price, and sell on that gap and fill that in. I think another one is skepticism. So they just really don't quite have faith in what you're saying. For some reason or not, they're not saying you're lying, but they just go, I really have a tough time believing that claim. There's another one that's misconceptions.
Well, people don't understand the difference between a claim and a fact.
Right. Well,
I don't go into that whole thing, but
Yeah.
if we claim things that seem hard to grasp, skepticism will come out.
Right. And most of us, I think, are selling services. So when you're selling a service, you're selling a promise, and you can't offer a guarantee or warranty in most cases with a service like you can a product. So the skepticism has a big impact on whether or not somebody's believing a promise that a salesperson is giving. There's misconceptions, which are false evidence appearing real based on the past, based on something that they heard from somebody that's not true. And there can be a little overlap between skepticism and misconceptions.
And your competitors, if they're good, are building the misconception of your product. If you're in a competitive sales situation, I certainly request, if I find out I'm in a competitive sales situation, I will say, well, why don't you ask them if they can do this, which I know is their weakness.
Right.
So
Good. Yeah.
I will create barriers for my competition if I know that they have a weak area.
I think a good way of leading that is saying, I'm not going to say that they can't do that, but I'm not going
to. Well, yeah, I don't talk bad about them.
I'm not going to tell you this, right?
I don't talk bad. I just say, why don't you ask them? This sounds important to you. Make sure they can do it,
right? And
see how they answer you.
And then the last one is a complaint, and that's probably one of the easiest ones to deal with. And that's just a matter of fact, just listening to them and just let them go on a rant and just say, I certainly understand how you feel. And I'm really gracious that I'm grateful that you brought that up, and thanks for letting me know, and go from there. But you need to give them a chance to just kind of vent.
Yeah. I look at objections in a little bit different way. So you put them into a very broad, more behavioral. I put them into kind of the 5 big issues that come up. One is need, meaning you didn't really identify that there's a great need for this product or service in the customer's mind, or a need to change from the one that they're currently using. So you haven't been able to increase the FUD, or the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that creates a need, or they didn't come. And most salespeople, to tell you the truth, a lot of salespeople don't have to deal with need because all they're doing is answering the phone. You have to deal with need a lot more if you're creating sales than if you're just answering sales opportunities.
And this is where we're competing with an incumbent in some cases, somebody that's already there.
Absolutely. The second one is price. The second objection falls into a category of price. This is it's too cheap, although it can be. Salespeople can underprice their product to the point where people say that must not have much value. So, and if they drop their price too quickly, it tells them that you didn't have a real price here to start with. I think I used an example the other day where somebody said, well, it's like $100 or something like that.
Oh, geez.
What's something like $100? Like 80? Let's work on this price objection. So we create a lot of price objections ourselves by giving the impression that there's some movement that we can take in the price. Timing, obviously, is a third one, and that is this the right time to make this change? Are we able to at this time? Can we put in the effort that it's going to take to do this? Is our problem big enough? Number 4 is authority, and this is a problem for salespeople. They sell to the wrong person who doesn't have the authority to make the change, or they don't get the whole team together that has that authority, and they never ask a question that says, in addition to you, who else is going to have to make this decision? And then number 5 is a broad category of delay. And I know we're going to go into this in a future podcast. I have to think about it. Delay. It's also, we'll do this in 6 months. It's a timing. I'm going to delay this for a reasonable period of time. Those are the 5: need, price, timing, authority, and delay.
Those are very good. In looking at when's the best time to handle an objection, you have 4 options on when to do it. I mean, I think the best way to deal with an objection is obviously before it comes up. Back in the days when I was selling real estate, I remember going to a house that I think was just perfect for the buyers that I was working with. It just fit their needs perfectly. But unfortunately, it had been vacant for a while, and for some reason, the electricity was turned off, which, of course, the sump pump didn't work then, and there was water in the basement. And I said to him, I believe that this is a perfect house for you, and I'd like you to see it. But however, there's 2 inches of water in the basement, and that's because it's been vacant for a while. The sump pump didn't work because the electricity's been turned off. You still want to see it. And they said, yes, we do want to see it. So when we got to the house, they can't say, what are you showing us this house? It's got 2 inches of water in the basement. I had already brought it up. They already said yes to it. And now they can't use that on me later because it's been brought up before. So
I don't think it's always just in a unique case. Now, what you're talking about is a unique case, but earlier we talked about knowing what the objections that are going to come up are. And then start to develop a strategy to overcome them. And that's exactly what you're talking about. If I've gotten that objection 3 or 4 times, I'd better start having a strategy for it and not keep getting the same objection over and over again.
So, you can just figure out the 4 ways. There's before it happens, while it's happening, after an objection comes up, and then sometimes you just never respond to an objection.
Tell me about that one. I thought that was interesting.
How you just never respond to it?
Yeah.
So I think when I dealt with probably the most objections was probably earlier in my sales career when I was selling real estate. So I remember one buyer that I was showing a house to, and the previous owner had dogs, and they were looking at the baseboards, and they said, these baseboards are all scratched up. And I go, well, what could I say? Yes, they are. So what kind of response could I give them to make them feel better about it? Yes, you're right. They are.
You should see my windowsills. I have 2 windowsills that my dog uses to bark at, and she scratches them up.
Of course.
But so you just ignored that and moved on.
I heard it. It was kind of a complaint. There wasn't anything that I could really do about it. It's a fact. It's not a brand new house. There have been people living in there before they got there. So. Yeah.
So it's I understand, or I acknowledge it. I can't do
so
anything
you're
about it.
You're right. You're right.
Okay, I look at a process. I like to go through a process, and this is again for the serious issues that we need to really deal with. One, I think we need to listen fully to the problem, and I've seen a number of salespeople, and I've been guilty myself, of thinking I heard their objection and then interrupting them as they're trying to explain to me. I think it's always a bad thing for a salesperson to interrupt. Let the person vent, say it, get it all out. And quite often they'll answer their own objection or give you a hint as to how to answer this objection in a positive way for them. The second step is to evaluate it. Is this something that I need to deal with, or are they just venting and I have to be in? So that's your process with the baseboards.
Right,
What do I really need to do about this other than say, I see? And then get in tune with the client, which is, I understand how scratched baseboard could look bad, but they can be replaced. Right? So get in tune with them, and then perhaps ask for more details. Quite often, if I ask a question like, well, tell me why that's important to you, or tell me what that means to you. What if we don't replace those baseboards? What will happen? Well, maybe I can use it as a negotiation piece. Well, then I would suggest that we use that as a negotiation piece.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And to get the intent behind the content.
Yes.
And a great question to ask is, I appreciate you bringing that up. I'm kind of curious, why did you bring that up now?
Right.
Or you must be telling me that for a reason. Do you mind sharing it with me?
Or is that a deal breaker for you?
Right. Yeah, good.
Well, not really. I just wanted to point it out. Okay, good. You kick the tires a little bit, and you said the door's got a scratch in it, and so that's what the car is. That's part of the price process.
Yeah.
So,
and strategies. What strategies do you have?
Yeah. So one strategy is you can explain. This is how we do it. This is help them understand it more effectively. Another strategy to use is third-party testimonials. I use a feel, felt, found. If you've never heard feel, felt, found before, you haven't really been in sales long enough.
Right. Yeah. It's
and
been around
that
a while.
is, I know how you feel. We've had customers who have felt the same way as you have. But let me tell you what we found. So that's the feel, felt, found process, and that can bring in the third-party testimonial. I know how you feel, Bob. I felt the same way myself, but let me tell you what I found when I started to really work with this. And the third one is for the really creative salesperson, and that is reason to buy. So let's use your baseboard example again. Scott, these baseboards are scratched. Well, is that really important to you? Well, I do some woodworking myself, and the quality of the wood is important to me. Well, is this really the quality of wood you'd want in the baseboards? Well, no, I probably like this or that. Well, that's the very reason you should buy this house. It's a great opportunity for you to put in a higher quality baseboard and upgrade the house itself. So you can turn around the objection to actually be the reason to buy. This is the perfect house for you because you're going to get a better price on it because there's water in the basement. And so it gives you it's been, the reason there's water in the basement has been on the market for a long time. The price is dropping. This is a great time for you to buy.
Right.
So be creative in your strategies that you use, but always listen fully to that prospect and find out why they are bringing that up. And as you said, bring it up at this time. I thought that was a great question.
Good. Thanks. When you start talking about third-party testimonials, and I like the one where you would say, what price do you want to stay under? And instead of saying, how high is your budget? You say, tell me what price you want to stay under. Well, we want to stay under, I'll just make up a number. We want to stay under 15,000.
Right.
Okay. I won't show you anything that's over 15,000 because I wouldn't want to feel like I'm not respecting what price you want to stay under. So if there's anything that's over 15,000, I won't show it to you. Now, what's a prospect's natural reaction going to be? Well, wait a minute. I want to know what else is out there.
Yeah, so if there's something at 15,001, I'm not going to show that to you because I'm going to respect you. Well,
wait a minute.
Even if it's a great thing, I'm not going to bother you with it because.
So what are they really telling you? 15,000 is not a hard number. It's not a firm price that they want to stay under.
Because I'm looking for the value.
Best value. You say, okay,
right.
all right.
So you want me to show you some things that maybe go bump into 16 or 17 if I think they're really good? Yeah, you think they're really a great value.
Okay. And then you can decide what's the best value. But I want to make sure that you have all the information available to make the best decision. And I just want you to be able to have a wide variety. It's always like exploring options.
You're using a little of that psychology on them.
Well, yeah. I want to make them feel like they're in control. When they're in control, then they feel like they're empowered.
So often we should be asking for those types of permissions.
Yeah.
Right? Can I show you something a little over that budget if it's the right thing? Sure you can. Right? And then it opens the door for you to be able to do more.
There's an overlap between handling objections and negotiations. They kind of go hand in hand in some areas.
Oh, absolutely they do.
And it's important to just not get too firm on where you're at on some things, but to ask more questions, explore more options, find out the intent behind the content. Find out, why are you asking me that? Why are you asking me that now? Or you must be telling me that for a reason. Do you mind sharing it with me? So you're really getting more information.
You wanted the listeners to email us some objections?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, what are some of the objections that our listeners are hearing and which ones are causing them to kind of stall out and not make the sale? So if you'd like, email Bill and I the questions, the objections that you're getting.
Right.
You can go to the website, getinthedoorpodcast.com. There's a form there. Fill out the form, put your objection in the comments, and send it off, and Bill and I will get that. I'd love to
get enough of those. Maybe we'll put a whole podcast together on how we would role play through some of those objections.
And I think we both have some resources that we can share with folks that are interested. Again, go to the website, getinthedoorpodcast.com. I've got a blog on what is it going to take to win your business. And Bill, you've got one on when the prospects hesitate.
They do. They hesitate for a number of reasons. So, well, our golden nugget today, I got a chance to pick out, and that is, speaking about challenges that we have, by Josh Billings. If we had no winter, the spring would not be so pleasant. If we did not sometimes taste of adversity, prosperity would not be so welcome.
Wow. It's a great quote. I mean, it creates a very visual image, and it really focusing on the law of contrast, where we're comparing one against another. And it seems like that's how value is appreciated and defined, by comparing one against another. I mean, when somebody says, go around the table and say, what's your personal and professional best? And I go, well, I didn't get into a car accident, so that's good. And we kind of forget about the things that don't happen to us, because then we're comparing what didn't happen to us to where we are. I mean, it's not that we're bored. It's this, there's nothing bad happening. And that's a good thing.
And I like to think about in these situations of adversity is having a sore throat. All right, when we have a sore throat, every swallow that we take hurts. And eventually we don't even want to swallow, and we're thinking about it all the time. And then slowly it goes away. And then one day we wake up and we're thinking, hey, I'm not thinking about swallowing every time anymore. Some people have said that pleasure is really just the absence of pain. And if we don't experience adversity, then that's what he's saying. Prosperity would not be so welcome. If we haven't gone through adversity, we don't understand really how wonderful it is to go out there and do the hard work that creates prosperity. Now, we started to create visuals for you of these quotes and put them on the resource page at Get in the Door Podcast.
So all this information that Bill and I shared with you is at the show notes at getinthedoorpodcast.com. So you can check it out there.
My website is reachdev.com. Next week, Scott, we have Chapter 7 of The Magic of Thinking Big. Manage your environment and go first class. And then our topic is going to be major account strategy. What do we do to grow within an account? Go out there and have a great week of selling.
Great to be with you.